welcome back to another episode of God Built This Podcast. I'm your host, Maxine, and we're on episode 190. Okay, I think I need like a real coaster because the coaster that I have, all the coasters that I have, even the one that I was gifted, doesn't really serve as a coaster. Like, why is the coaster sweating? You know how the cup of water would sweat? The coaster is sweating as well. Like, it's leaking. And whenever I would pick it up, I have to be mindful to not sway it in my hand because there's a pool of water. It's the weirdest thing. So shout out to me needing new coasters, actual coasters that, actually do their job. Okay. Hey everybody, so this episode is late, I know, and I'm just here to speak to the elephant in the room, but I'm here. I was this close to not releasing an episode today just because I was just down. I guess I was trying to find my spark up because of this transition in my life, career-wise. It's just been an emotional roller coaster for me. I've just been feeling overwhelmed with just these like what if thoughts, and I would feel hopeful of a prospect and then suddenly, get ghosted on. It's like, it's just the weirdest thing. It's the weirdest process, but I am trying my best to remain faithful and positive and hopeful, but I'm just waiting on a couple of things, and the waiting period is difficult because I got bills, I got stuff that I gotta take care of, and things are kind of tight. So anyway, I was just feeling really down. And I was thinking to myself, well, maybe I just need like a mental health day. That whole excuse now, like, I can't go into work, mental health. Even though I do understand how that sounds so like ridiculous to like the elderly, like the boomer generation. They may look at this generation like, oh, a bunch of weak ass motherfuckers. What you need? Mental health day? What is that? Get your ass up and go to work. Go to work. I get that. I do get that, because I think sometimes some people may overuse it or abuse it. So I do understand that, but I like, mental health is really an actuality. Like, it's not something that is okay to put aside anymore. And being that we're now in a stage in our society when mental health is part of the conversation and is sensitive, I think it is necessary to recognize, hey, I'm not having happy thoughts right now, and it's not consistent, or it is consistent of me not having happy thoughts, and I need a second, and in this second I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to get myself right. So I think that's necessary, because if we don't have those actual moments with ourselves, by ourselves, or with people, whomever, then who knows, what you're liable to do. Because I think everyone has a level of crazy. I really do. I think everyone is capable of doing anything just as crazy as the serial killer that we learned about in that documentary, right? Like, there's always, like, I think everyone has a ticking bomb, and whatever it is that justifies it is your justification tool. Like, okay, this is case that I just learned about of a shooting that took place in Atlanta. And I'm going to read it once I find it. But let's just start off with, I got it from Tariq Nasheed, who I'll look at his tweets, and I do follow him on Twitter. Some of the things that he say I find interesting, but what I really don't like about him, this is really his pillar that he stands on, is his just outright hatred for any Caribbean blacks, any African Americans, any African black, like anyone who's non-FBA, he hates them, and he makes that very clear. So it's just very weird, considering that I am of Haitian descent. So, but let's get into this case because I came across it just this morning and I was just taken aback. But I think what is so often in just our society is that we are quick to just leave a conversation with minimal knowledge of what we were actually talking about. So like with this case here, you'll read the headline and then that's it. Like there's no desire to want to know about the actual story to really get into it. But I'm going to get into it for you all because I think it's a necessary story to discuss, especially considering that I'm in a position that, like, I'm in a position where, like, I get mad at jobs now. Like, it's to the point where it's like, you know what? Well, fuck you. Well, you know what I mean? Like, well, fuck you for not following up like you said you was going to. Fuck you. I don't want this bitch ass job anyway. But it's like, I really do want it. But it gets so frustrating when, if you're an employee of whatever company and your employer is not doing right by you, or your employer is not recognizing your value. And it's just a common experience that many employees feel. And, we all have, well, most of us, we have our crazy checked. We have it checked. We're not going to go off the handle and go off the roof. But some people, they reach that ticking time bomb and it's like, you know what? Well, fuck you then, nigga. I'm going to go into this job and kill you. So let's get into this actual case that took place. And, rest in peace, though, to the people involved. But, the employer should have did right by her. They should have did right by her. And I understand. Look, I don't condone her shooting and killing 2 people. Okay? But I understand. Shout out to that Chris Rock joke. I would never forget that joke. Oh, my gosh. Where he's in that... it's the special where he's in Africa. Well, he's in multiple places and he's wearing that black and white suit. And it's one of the jokes that he talks about, take that, you quack ass motherfucker, you quack ass motherfucker. And it was another joke, but it was in that same special. He did that other joke. But yeah, he was like, look, there's niggas, but then I understand. It was something like that. But anyway, it's so funny. Okay, so let's get into this case. Her name is Raissa, if I'm saying it correctly, is Raissa. Raissa Kegne. So Raissa Kegne shot the building manager and building engineer in shooting at Midtown Atlanta near Colony Square as she retaliated against her former employer. The manager is deceased. Now, reading that alone already tells you a lot of key info. She retaliated, okay? And I'm glad that they included that in the headline rather than it looking like this crazy black woman just walked up in there and was mad because you didn't approve my PTO. No, this was someone who decided to defend herself, and it was in retaliation of what was done to her by her former employer. So I think this is necessary to look further into, and so I did. So let's get into this. So she decided to get back at her former employer, and unfortunately that left 2 people dead. And, at this point it's like, yes, RIP, but, it is what the fuck it is. Why did you do me wrong? So I want to get to the part in, how you looking at articles and there's like so many weird ass ads. Like this ad that I'm looking at right now is of like, it says diabetes is not from sweets. And then you see these 2 like big fatty things. Like, what is this? And then you see this white woman with her overflowing belly button. What is this? Okay. Wesley Freeman, who was 41 years old, and Michael Shiners, who was 60 years old, were recognized as the victims who passed away by the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office. Okay, now I'll see more ads. While they were conducting their investigation at that location, They received a call, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Yeah, I want to get into specifically why she did what she did. So, okay. Raisa worked for a company and was fired with her only crime was exposing her boss's fraudulent transactions. Okay. So she worked at this company. She recognized that her boss was doing something that was fraudulent and it wasn't okay. And it was impacting people, right, negatively. And being the kind-hearted person that she was, or maybe God-fearing, maybe she was the type of, because there are employees who do the job in honor of God. If you go back to the Bible, it talks about do everything for the glory of God, right? So how can I demonstrate God's glory in my profession? How can I demonstrate God's glory in the way I communicate with others, in my behavior, in my driving, right? Like, so in every aspect of my life, how can I demonstrate that God's glory is going through me? So she's taking everything with integrity. So I really think I'm going into this with this mindset because I feel like someone who cares enough about exposing her boss's fraudulent transactions has to be someone who puts God first and decided to, look, I'm doing everything with God's glory. I go into work with this, this honor and this integrity and making sure that everything that I'm doing is just honorable, right? You can't fault me for anything because I'm doing it with strong character. And when she came across her boss's fraudulent transactions, she decided to expose him because she probably felt like that was the right thing to do. So, of course, after exposing her boss's fraudulent transactions, she was fired. And after being fired, she decided to sue her boss and then start her own business. Worried about the consequences of the lawsuit, her former boss began to threaten her and her loved ones. So whatever the fraudulent transactions were, it must have been big enough for her former boss to be so worried about what could come about from the lawsuit that he's experiencing against him by her, that he thought it was in his best interest for his next step was to threaten her and her loved ones. Like, that is so messed up. You can't just fire me, let me go. No, you have to go about threatening my life and the life of my loved ones. Okay. So his ex-boss didn't stop to these threats. Okay, that must have been a typo. Her ex-boss didn't stop to these threats. He got close to the concierge of the building, Raisa. Okay, yeah. So her ex-boss, got close to the concierge of the building that Raisa was a tenant in. Okay, so now you have a former employer who is threatening your life and your loved one's life, so much so that he decided to get close to her concierge. Okay, so of course he already had access to her residence because she was a former employee of his, and he decided to get close to the concierge, which is weird. Like, how did you even get close to the concierge? So the concierge, who obviously demonstrated corrupt character, decided to agree with the ex-boss, and they conjured up a plan to burglarize Raisa's apartment. This is not made up, y'all. This is crazy. The intention of the plot was to destroy all evidence of the lawsuit in his computer. And I keep on saying his. I wonder if I'm reading the right. Okay. In his computer, and to steal his backup of any documents that might involve his former boss. The break-in was smooth executed, leaving no trace behind. So, yeah, that must have just been a pronoun typo, because now the next paragraph says, as soon as Raisa found out she had been robbed. See what I'm saying? Okay, whatever. So all of that is still in the correct storyline. So Raisa, who is a former employee, just a quick recap, she got fired from her job because she exposed her boss of fraudulent transactions. She then sued her boss and started her own company after being fired. Because her boss was worried her ex-boss was worried about the consequences of the lawsuit, he decided to threaten her and her loved ones. He then figured out how to get close to the concierge of her building, and because the concierge was a corrupt person, they got close and conjured up a plan to burglarize into Raisa's apartment. The point of the burglary was to steal any backup of any documents that she had that may involve her former boss. So that was the goal, that was the purpose. The break-in was smoothly executed. No trace was left behind. Now, when Raisa found out she had been robbed, she alerted the Atlanta police. She went about the correct authority figures to report this. Yet, unfortunately, because the police ain't shit, they don't do anything right, the police investigation was unable to establish that she was robbed. Because, again, when they robbed her, they did such a great job, they didn't leave a trace behind. As there is no evidence that neither her door nor her trunk were broken into. So it was after the failure of her repeated attempts to convince police she was robbed that Raisa took out her frustration on her former co-workers at her former workplace. Among the two men she killed were, the two men that I said earlier. So, look, of course, I don't condone shooting up your former workplace. But I understand. No, but I think, okay, looking aside from the murders, okay, and the death, so what happened? The result was the death of these two people whom targeted her, right? They targeted her, so she retaliated, but all of this resulted into the death of those two men and injury of another person. Now, I don't know if that other person had anything to do with her wrath and her just, experience overall of getting threatened, or was it like a stray shot? Either way, she decided to let her frustrations be known in this manner. And it sucks that this could have been stopped much sooner, right? If the Atlanta police decided to really take her seriously, if the lawsuit, if the court system, if something protected her, right? If her life didn't get threatened time and time again, and her loved ones didn't get threatened because of her ex-boss deciding to go after her because she exposed him for fraudulent transactions. Now, look, I think there are some people who may think, well, she should have just kept her mouth shut, right? Like, maybe she should have just minded her business and not expose her former boss's fraudulent transactions. And that's your prerogative. I think some people are more of a truth teller than others. I think some people are not quick or at all interested in acquiescing to whatever boss or master says. So I do commend her for speaking up and speaking out against fraudulent behavior and transactions that was taking place at her workplace. I think there is a place for whistleblowers. I think whistleblowers should be protected. I just finished a couple weeks ago, but I watched The Dropout, which is about that white woman who was like the female Steve Jobs. I can't remember her name right now. But that white woman who just had this messed up hairdo, her hair always looked a mess, and she had this like smeared makeup look that she had going on. Oh my gosh, it's bothering me. Now I'm gonna figure out her name. Hold on. Her name is Elizabeth. No, what? I'm trying to find out. Yo, what's her fucking name? Elizabeth Holmes. Yes, Elizabeth Holmes. So look, I just feel like don't do people wrong particularly when it comes to like work stuff. Like, if I'm trying to be a strong employee here and you're not recognizing my value, you're shitting on me, you're just not doing right by me, like, when it comes to job and people's workplace, obviously that's their way of providing or receiving income. It's just really, it's a sucky feeling to know that you're going into this place every single day, considering it's not remote and considering you're working normal, regular hours, 8 hours a day, and to be devalued time and time again, and then to be this rich character of a person. And look, I get it. She killed 2 people. It's maybe she didn't show God's glory then. Where was God's glory then? when she decided to take her gun and walk, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be laughing. R.I.P. But I mean, God's glory probably wasn't there. But look, early before that took place, God's glory was there probably. Like, I really do think that she probably was this worker who worked hard and was credible and reliable and took her work seriously. Those type of workers. You know how now we're in a culture when quiet quitting is a thing and it's a new term now. Like, I've learned that a couple of months ago, but I'm seeing that just more prevalent. And it's so interesting how like the work culture has shifted so much since COVID and since the pandemic. I think people are recognizing, like, yo, fuck this job though. Like, I'm sick of coming in here. I'm sick of feeling like this every time I'm here. I'm sick of not being valued. I'm sick of not being valued financially, or just socially or whatever it is. And I want something new for myself. I want to go after this other goal that I have, and I want to put more focus and energy there, and yada yada yada. And I think now there is more of an acceptance to just not follow suit with that whole mindset of 9 to 5. And respectfully, I think there's a place for, you can do both, right? Like, I think there are people who are just fine where they are, and that's totally fine. Like, there's no judgment. And there are people who may want different and may want different experiences. So, all in all, fuck these jobs though. Like, I just, I always wonder, like, I feel like, being that we're, it's 2022, we're not in 2003 anymore or whatever. I think there should be a different protocol when it comes to determining if this applicant is the right person for the job. Like, how before, and I don't know if it's a thing now, but I am wondering, like, are employers looking online to see, oh, is this person a good role model, right? Like, should I hire this person? Will they meet our code of conduct? So let me check out their social media profile, right? Let me check. So, and I'm saying that to say, I used to have my account on Instagram private. I used to have it private. And, a lot of times I had it private because working with kids ultimately, and, young boys, and young girls, but, just young boys in general, looking to see, oh, what else is going on? So when they would find me online and see that, hey, I live a life outside of work. my life does not consist of solely teaching you motherfuckers, respectfully. And I think there's that fear, not fear, but I think in the school environment in particular, it's just that, oh my gosh, what if the principal finds out that I have a bikini pic up? It's like, okay, so I'm at a pool and I'm wearing a bikini. Like, what the fuck are we talking about? Yeah, of course the bikini pic is up. So anyway, I say all that to say, like, there's this old school mentality of, oh, should I be prim and proper online? Like, no, I don't know. I just think I don't know, maybe it depends on what position you're applying to, but I hope the employer, I mean, it's not to say that anything I have online is like, oh my God, it's like, I'm not like, cutting the heads off dogs, on my Instagram. Like, what? It's a regular social profile that I have. So, but I do hope no one's listening to, not no one's listening. I hope everyone's listening, but I do hope that my future employers are not checking out my podcast to see, oh, what she got going on. I don't know, that's just weird to me. But either way, I just hope that that's not a thing anymore when applying and when possibly determining if this person is the right person for the job. So speaking of social media faux pas, this black female therapist who got fired recently, I am laughing my ass off. I'm laughing my ass off for a plethora of reasons. And I just, look, I know I went on a quick rant just a moment ago talking about employers shouldn't determine your your employment with them based off of your social media profile. Here's the thing though. There's a little caveat to that. And this caveat is definitely shown with this black female therapist in particular. So this black female therapist, I'm sure some of you guys may have came across it on social media. I don't know her name. I don't really care to find it. I mean, look, when I click this article, I'll probably find out her name. But she is pretty popular on TikTok, apparently. And I don't follow TikTok because fuck China. No. Communist China. No, but anyway, so she decided to film this TikTok, and not just film, but produce and distribute it for all to see, a TikTok of just shitting on black men. And she said how 90% of the black men clientele that she has need to expand their emotional vocabulary. And this must have been like a new word that she started using, because she kept on repeating emotional vocabulary throughout throughout this TikTok. But anyway, she just was going in. It was just very negative, such a negative tone against black men, and was mad, like, basically like calling them just like ain't shit, and they have nothing, it's better, like, why can't you communicate it fast? Her tone was just really awful in her explanation. And though she did not say the name of a client, right? Though she did not make anything specific, she did describe a demographic in which she serves. So I think that is inappropriate. I really do. I think there is a level of decorum, and I know I just came off a rant just a moment ago talking about, I hope my employers aren't listening to my podcast, or future employers. But I do think though, like, I guess particularly for therapy, if you're a therapist, you want to be able to have your patients, your clients, feel safe and welcomed with you. Now, not God forbid, but what if I'm sure maybe one of her black male patients may have came across her TikTok and was like, shit, this is how she feels about me? Like, this is what she's saying, behind my back. And though she didn't say my name directly in her TikTok, but it would make me feel uncomfortable continuing to go to her as my therapist. Like, I would feel weird, and I don't think that is appropriate. So anyway, she got fired. She got fired, and the whole her whole tone shifted after she got fired. So she got fired because she got doxxed. Now, doxxed is a term that is fairly new and that I just learned recently because it's been said over and over. But basically, doxxed is when someone finds your personal information, someone who's just like maybe just a viewer of your content, and they may disagree with whatever you just shared online, and they disagree and hate you so much that they go out of their way to find your personal information. So your personal information could be your employment address, your residence, your school, the school of your children. It could be any personal information, and they will go out of their way to make sure that it's not a pleasurable experience for you. So maybe they find out your employment and the address and the phone number of your employment, and they call and tell your boss, tell your supervisor or whomever at your job reasons why you should be fired. and they tell the job about your behavior online. And it just becomes a spiraling thing where it eventually trickles down to you receiving some type of consequence from your job and feeling threatened about your life because someone doxed you. So that's what happened to her. Someone doxed her, and this someone would happen to be a black woman. Multiple black women apparently went out their way to report her to her employer, and it got so bad, so much so that her employer decided to let her go. And so she came back on TikTok making that clear that she got let go. And not even just that, though, because I think it was in addition to black women, and maybe I'm sure black men as well, but it was a majority of black women that I'm seeing that went out their way to report her to her employer. And there's been articles written since that TikTok has been released. So these articles talk about her, and she's now becoming more prevalent online, and it's looking bad, right? So it becomes in your face. So I feel like even if the black women who reported her didn't report her, I feel like her employers and maybe the people whom she worked with may have come across her info and what happened because they saw it online. So I think either way, this would have gotten back to her employer, and this would have put her in an uncomfortable position. So anyway, so she got fired, and she's upset about it. She released a TikTok explaining what happened, that she got fired, and she's posting the article that talked about her, and the article is written by a black woman. It says that written by a black woman, that's what it says. No, but I think not only does the article says the name of the woman, but it may have a picture of the woman too. So that's what I feel like it does, because it's like, I wonder how she knows she's a black woman, but that's what I think. But yeah, so she got fired, and there's a conversation happening about it. People are at a conflict because some people agree that she should have gotten fired, and that that's not okay. You shouldn't speak about a demographic that you're treating as a therapist so poorly. You shouldn't be talking about them so poorly when it's like, okay, like this is not. It's just inappropriate. Like, keep that shit between you and your girlfriends, right? Keep that shit in your journal, but don't go on TikTok knowing that you're already having a popular profile and expect to not get some backlash for it. And then on the other hand, you have some people who feel like, oh, she shouldn't have gotten fired, and the reason why she got fired because of black men. And it's just funny that black men are continuously made to feel like they're at fault here, but in this case they weren't. But it just was a easy scapegoat because, well, she was talking poorly about black men, so of course black men were the ones who made sure she got fired, when in actuality it was black women. So, I mean, I guess it doesn't really fucking matter. I think ultimately she violated a level of conduct, a code of conduct that I think was definitely violated, and it was inappropriate. And whatever you think she may have deserved, I think at the very least, you can't be a therapist and you go on TikTok talking about her specific demographic of clientele and talking shitty about them. And it's one thing to talk about, like, and I think maybe her delivery was just really off and awful. And I think not just her delivery, but I think it was just like, just her choice of words. I think it was all of that. I think maybe if she talked about, or like maybe like helpful things that black men can do to increase their emotional vocabulary. You see, that's a good TikTok. Like, had she created a fun TikTok that talked about 5 things I noticed in my practice as a therapist, and then she talks about those 5 things, and then she gives some solutions. here, she keeps on talking about emotional vocabulary, right? So then how about you give 5 tips or 3 tips of ways to expand your emotional vocabulary? And she's targeting this video to black men. Hey, black men. Hey, are you a black man? Let me tell you 3 things, 3 ways you can expand your emotional vocabulary. First, you can communicate. Make sure you communicate to the woman whom you love and she's aware of how you're feeling so she doesn't have to guess and feel ghosted when you don't respond to her text. Communicate. Tip 2, make sure you just fucking provide solutions. Like, I get it. Like, we're very much, we go online and it's easy to like complain and rant. Look, I do that all the time, but I just think there's a limit to just your profession and what type of complaints you're giving online, particularly if it's a complaint regarding a demographic of your clientele. Like, come on, girl. Like, that was you can't deny that was not appropriate. Like, you can't deny that. So, shout out to her. Shout out to her. I wish her well. So Kim Kardashian, her robber. So remember when she got robbed a couple years ago in Paris? And it was like this whole new, this was when she was obviously still with Kanye, and Kanye talked about it, and it was like this traumatic thing. And if you watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians, which I don't, but like they would show clips and stuff. So, ooh, excuse me. Anyway, so there's these clips there were clips that were shown about just her being robbed and her experience with that. So her robber decided to come out 2022 and say that he blames her for the robbery. You're probably thinking like, huh? What does that even mean? What the robber means, though, is I blame you for me robbing you because you're too showy. You're too showy with your jewelry. You're in my face, flaunting all of these diamonds and luxurious goods and all of these things. And I'm someone who is of a much lower class economically than you, and I'm triggered, right? And look, this may not be necessarily the right response, right? Like, it's still not okay. Like, you still shouldn't rob people just because you're doing bad. Like, that's not right. Like, why does that person have to be at fault for you doing how you're doing economically? That's like, people always like to say, well, there shouldn't, what's his name? What's the guy who makes Amazon? Benz. Oh my gosh. I feel like I have like a brain fart. Creator of Amazon. What's his name? So anyway, Jeff Bezos. I knew some Z. So Jeff Bezos. So a lot of people like to say, oh, if Jeff Bezos were to give every American $50,000, he would still be a billionaire. And basically, they're saying that this person who is so rich, beyond rich, he needs to pay my bills, right? He needs to make sure I'm good. And yeah, so he's worth $159 billion. Well, you know what? Well, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe he should get some. Especially considering how my account is looking like at the moment. No, I still look, I get it. I think it's so lazy, though. It's a lazy argument to make. Oh, well, the rich should just pay me. The billionaires should just give us money. Us poor folk, we need some money. Look, I don't feel like that is the responsibility of a billionaire, of a Bill Gates, of a Jeff Bezos. Like, I don't feel like that is the right mindset to have. That's just me. And that's, look, I'm saying this and I'm not doing too shabby right now, but I'm still saying this because I think there's a level of like integrity or etiquette that you should have at the very least. Like, instead of focusing so much about what the rich and what the billionaires and being so mad at them for being billionaires, just focus on you and being in your lane. You know, I was just on here a couple of episodes ago mad and frustrated because I'm like, how are so many people having these European ass vacations, you know? Where I didn't get the memo. Like, how are you able to afford going to Europe in the summer every summer? Or how are you able to afford going on this international trip and you're also able to purchase a YSL bag that's $2,000? Like, it's like I'm focusing on the wrong things, right? Like, that's really the mindset that I realized, oh, that's what I was doing. Like, when we spend so much time comparing ourselves and what our account looks like compared to what someone else's account may look like, and we don't know, look, this is his net worth. I'm not saying that he isn't accurately worth this amount, right? This could be true. This could be maybe a couple of billions off. Either way, he's doing substantially better than me, you know, someone like me. But regardless, it doesn't matter. I just think when we focus so much on what someone else is doing and their pockets, we fail to realize our own worth. We fail to realize, how can I use my talents, my gifts to ensure I'm living a life of substance, of happiness, of peace and joy. And I know that sounds so like wonky and, well, okay, Maxine. But seriously, I think we have to just stop blaming others or stop blaming the white man or the billionaire at that. Like, it's not fruitful. But anyway, the robber decided to speak up and say Kim Kardashian is to blame for why I robbed her, you know. And look, I do think there should be a level of etiquette someone should demonstrate. Now, I don't know how Kim Kardashian was acting in front of this robber. Like, I don't know. I think the robber may have been following her, and like online specifically. Well, obviously in Paris too, but I think maybe the robber was probably following her online and was seeing all the luxurious items that she was posting and sharing online, that it made him feel like, oh, you're rubbing it in my face. I don't know, because I do wonder, what does he mean by her being too showy? You know, like, did she know him personally and make him feel bad for not having as much money or has much access to luxurious goods like she does? Like, I don't know what he means by that. I just feel like he probably was someone who was a follower of hers online and was just so upset that she gets to live this lavish lifestyle and he doesn't. And so I'm going to get back at her for being too showy, when it's like she doesn't even know who you are, you know? So that's what I think it is. But yeah, I do think though there should be a level of etiquette that those who make more money than others should have when you're in the company of someone who's not in the same tax bracket as you. Like, I don't feel like it's appropriate. I think it's very tacky to talk about how much money you're making when you're around someone who's probably struggling this month, you know, who don't know when their next check is coming, and you're over here talking about, I just spent $50,000 on this, you know. It's like, what? I just think this, you know, that's why I don't like talking about money. I feel like, you know, a lot of us attach our worth to money and how much we make, and we attach our worth to if we can purchase and own a name brand that is luxurious, you know, that's a Gucci, that's a YSL and stuff like that. And it's like, when that shouldn't be, like, it shouldn't be a part of the conversation. But unfortunately, a lot of us still have a mindset in which we feel like our worth is determined by the money that we make. And yeah, so I think, regardless, you should be humble. You should be humble for whatever you have, and just be mindful that not everyone is where you are, right? And I'm not even talking about a Kim Kardashian level, right? I'm talking about, like, if you're someone who's making $90,000 a year, and that's great, I look at that as, that's good, that's livable, that's good enough money, all these things, right? And you're happy with that amount, you're you're like talking about it more because you have more access to X, Y, and Z, while a peer of yours, who actually may not be a peer, but someone who may be making just $45,000 a year, while you're making $90,000 a year, and you're over in their company talking about how much you're making and flaunting it. I think that is fucked up. Now, I don't think that is necessarily okay for that $45,000 a year person to rob you. Like, I don't think that's appropriate. No, but I do think it's rude and tacky for that person who makes more than you to make you feel, or just like even talk about their money in your presence, and not even on some like pity, oh, I'm pitying you. I just think in general, like, why are we comparing and contrasting how much we make? Like, let's talk about our character. Let's talk about our interests. Let's talk about our curiosities. Like, why are we talking about how much we're making? Unless we're all definitely, unless you're in a social group, in a social setting in which the people around you are all making the same amount as you, right, or within the same bracket, then I feel like it's fine and it's appropriate, at least enough. Regardless, I just think it's tacky. I just grew up like that. Like my parents never really, like, let's flaunt this or let's talk about it's just, it's weird. So anyway, her robber decided to come out and say that she was too showy. Okay, let's get into Married at First Sight. This past episode came on, and there's a lot to say about Justin and Alexis. Yeah, I think they're both in the wrong. Let me just go ahead and sip this water because I'm a bit parched. Okay, so I think they're both in the wrong with how they went about introducing their dogs to each other. Now, I feel like Alexis is finding any reason to use against Justin and to eventually say no on decision day. Like, I just don't, like, from the beginning, I just knew that she wasn't that into him, and she's like playing along. And I feel like, of course, being in this like high energy of like happiness and goodness and positivity because we got married, and oh my gosh, I just met you, and we're on this honeymoon, we're going water jet skiing, it's like, woo, all these like happy, fun emotions. Of course, you're going to feel the euphoria of love, right? Or whatever you think it is that you think is love. But of course you're going to feel these things. And then as soon as not even when you get on the flight back home, as soon as you check in for that flight, you know how you got to check in a day before? As soon as they checked in for their returning flight, that's when it hit, like, oh shit, we got to really be together. And I was seeing that, well, particularly in Justin's face. I feel like there was this energy shift in his face because he wasn't as excited and smiley and interactive. I felt like he was shut down and withdrawn in that airplane scene there was a scene of them in the airplane, and he just looked very sad and like, oh, this little bitch ass boy. That's what he looked like. So I'm like, oh goodness, this is like, I feel like his insecurities was taken over, and he's thinking to himself, oh my gosh, she's gonna realize that she married, me. then she's going to be upset and she's going to leave me. Like, I feel like all of his insecurities were coming over him, and it was definitely showing his face. Like, I picked up on it. Anyway, so they get to the dog introduction, and obviously she saw, and we saw before the attack happened, Justin's dog was already showing signs of aggression. Yet Alexis still thought it was appropriate to put her dog on the floor and let her dog be loose while she walks around his apartment. Or was it her apartment? It was the shared apartment. And so she decides to leave her dog on the floor. Mind you, her dog is not an aggressive dog. Her dog is very much of a petite size, especially in comparison to Justin's dog. So it just was very foolish of her to think that was a good idea. So she puts her dog down, and I actually read something recently on Reddit. Shout out to Reddit. I really love Reddit. Like, I love going on there and, like, just talking to people. It's just fun. Like, oh my gosh, there's a whole community of people who like different things that I like. Like, it's so fun. So anyway, I was on Reddit, on the maths page on Reddit, and there's this thread that I came across of someone explaining that the Justin's dog was actually not in the wrong, is what's being portrayed. You know, like, the episode was showing how that, because Justin, I think his dog is Maya, because his dog was showing aggression, his dog is a bad dog, his dog is aggressive, and you should give up your dog. That it was making it seem like, the fault is only on him or her. Justin's dog is a female dog. Yeah. Anyway, so what happened next? So yeah, so the thread that I read was, no, the fault really, like, the dog was just being a dog. Like, the dog should not have taken any blame for this, or blame should not be placed on the dog, because the dog actually, her space was being invaded. Because if you notice in that scene, Alexis's dog was sneaking up behind, not sneaking up, but was walking up behind Justin's dog. And I guess in dog world, that is an invasion of space. Like, you are in my space, like, you're in my bubble, even though it's a shared apartment at that point, because Alexis's dog was walking up in just the bubble of Justin's dog decided to act up and defend himself or herself. So I think her dog, these fucking dogs. Anyway, the dog was trying to defend herself, and it resulted into him attacking poor Newton. That's the other dog's name, Alexis's dog. I can't remember the other dog, but yeah, I think it's Maya or Myra. Either way, that was a fascinating perspective. I didn't realize, the dog probably was just just being a dog, and realizing, wait, you're in my space. Like, you're in my space right now, and I'm going to speak up, right? I'm going to say something. I'm going to attack, because you may be attacking me and whatever. So that's what happened. And that was very fascinating to me, because I felt like, I didn't realize that is like dog language, and how they go about talking and just like living or whatever. So that's what happened. And I just think ultimately, though, yes, Justin handled himself poorly. He's not an alpha man. And I feel like his dogs or his animals, like his cat and his dog, probably run the show. And Justin is just not man enough for Alexis. Like, ultimately, I think you see a mismatch. Obviously, just physically, you see a mismatch. I actually came across a photo of, and I must have missed this in the earlier episodes, because there's a real photo that I thought was fake, actually, because I'm like, wait, this can't be real, but it was real. It is real. It's a photo of Alexis holding up Justin, like holding up his 7 feet tall ass, and she's carrying him, and they're kissing in the photo. And you see Justin's arms wrapped around her neck, like holding on to her as she's carrying his 7 foot tall ass. Is everybody okay? This is so weird. Like, this is beyond strange. Like, what the fuck are we doing right now? Huh? And yet, that was just a moment that they had during the honeymoon. So, I'm looking at that picture like, okay, this is not going far. Like, you can't convince me. Jeff Bezos couldn't give me 150 of his billions to make me believe that Alexis will be okay with a man like that. You can't. Well, let's stop it. And I know people want to be nice and be like, oh, we should be able to live in a world where we shouldn't be surprised, or we shouldn't be weirded out that Justin is finding love. And I agree with that. I do agree with that. Sure, we shouldn't live in a world where we're looking at Justin like, what is he doing here? Like, we shouldn't do that, right? But let's be honest here. Right here in this match, it's not a match. So this whole like, let's just believe that Alexis is really into him shit is BS, because I can't believe it. It's not real and it's not happening. So let's stop. So I can't wait to watch this week's episode of it, because we see more things unravel, and it's just, we see the downfall finally happen. You know, I'm just happy to see. I'm just tired of the fake shit that was happening of Alexis like being so in love and I love you too. It's like, girl, no, you don't. Like, and he is just, oh my goodness. So I'm really actually happy. I'm looking forward to seeing the scenes of Justin and Alexis finally experiencing the downfall part of the roller coaster, like just going down, not even like going up and down, no, just like going all the way down and staying there. Shout out to Black Love. Okay, let's get into Stasia and Nate. I think the house that Nate showed is probably not his home. I really do. I think it's probably an Airbnb, because just the different moments in that scene made me feel like he didn't know things were going to be where they were. So when Stasia was looking around like they usually do, they look around or whatever, she was noticing, oh, you have empty oatmeal boxes, a lot of them just shoved in the cabinets. And he was like, oh, you have two used wine glasses in the cabinets. Oh. Oh, you have no clothes in your closet. Oh. What? Why doesn't he know what's going on in his home? Like, it just felt like he was surprised himself. Like, did he forget he lived here, or did he forget that he rented out an Airbnb? It just was weird. So I don't believe that he lives there. I mean, look, as far as their dynamic goes, I don't know. I really don't know. I feel like, again, I was in another conversation on Reddit, shout out to Reddit, of just like the mismatch financially between Nate and Stasia. And we learned that in this past episode, Stasia makes $450,000 annually, while Nate makes $150,000. And for someone who doesn't live in California, that sounds like a lot of money, like regardless of the mismatch between them, that sounds like a lot of money. And apparently in California, that's just like, it's more of a norm to have a 6-figure salary, which I just find fascinating. Like, oh my gosh. But that really is because of the high cost of living in California. So although my non-California brain would look at their salary as, oh my gosh, a lot of money, even with Nate being just $150,000 in comparison to Stasia's $415,000 annual salary. In California, though, that may not be a lot. Like, he may just be getting by, or like, I don't know how that looks like, but apparently the cost of living in California is that high that you will have to have those conversations and say, well, how can we budget here because it's tight, even though it's still six figures, right? So it's weird. Anyway, the conversation that I came across was that because of just how successful she is and how much money she's making, and clearly she's in a different tax bracket than him in just her home and her style and the assets that she have, and she is more successful in that way than he is. And there's just this conversation happening of like, why can't she find someone who's on her level? And I don't understand how she's single. And it's like, look, we have to be honest and recognize that I'm sure there are men who are of that same tax bracket, if not more, whom she came across, right, in her field, colleagues of hers. But unfortunately, what I've noticed to be a trend is men who are in that same tax bracket as Stasia are not as personable as Nate is, right? So they may not be fun and exciting and adventurous and nice and caring as Nate is, or what he's showing himself to be in some ways. And of course, she would want that. She wants someone who is personable, is vulnerable, is willing to commit to her. And I feel like, unfortunately, that is a sacrifice that she has to make. Like, look, I'll sacrifice not having a man who's of the same tax bracket as me so I could have a man who is kind. Like, the bar is to the ground, right? It's to the flow, not floor, the flow. And unfortunately, you have to determine, what is more important to you. Like, you have to say, look, do I want a man who's kind, or do I want someone who has money, right? Do I want a man who cares about my feelings and takes me out on dates and is attentive and makes quality time for me? Or do I want someone who could shower me with Gucci purses and, luxurious trips that are international? Like, and it's like, well, why can't I have both? Because it can't happen both ways. You got to pick one, bitch. Like, that's why. It really is. Like, sometimes it's just not, it is a sacrifice. Sometimes you have to settle in some areas, and that's just what it is. And I think that's what's happening here with Stasia and Nate. I do think they may both say yes on decision day. And I just think it's a dynamic that they would just have to figure out. But I feel like Stasia is not focused on the material things, because he may fill up her love tank, and it looks like he is. Like, she's smiling with him. It looks like she likes him. Now, I don't really see it for Nate as far as like, the romance factor goes. I feel like he just has such a childish face that it's hard for me to look at him as like a grown man. But look, if he rocks her boat, then he rocks that boat. He rocks that boat. So shout out to him. And you guys, I'm going to end the episode here. I'm going to go ahead and end the episode here. If you enjoyed any part of this episode, be sure to leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. And be sure to tell a friend, spread the word on God Built This Podcast, and I will check in with you guys next time. Peace. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of God Built This Podcast with your host, Maxine. Be sure to leave a review, give me 5 stars, and of course, subscribe. Also, follow God Built This Podcast on Instagram at God Built This Pod. God bless.